gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Hello and welcome to a new edition of Political Smackdown. We hope you had a nice 4th of July. However, we are recording this program a week early on June 27th. So as we're recording, the General Assembly is still in session. There's been a flurry of activity at the General Assembly in this week prior to the 4th. The Senate was finalizing a number of constitutional amendments that will presumably head to the House and likely be slated to be on the ballot by the time this program airs. Senate Bill 630 would limit voting only to U.S. citizens, require voter ID in all forms of voting, not just in person, and another would put a cap of 5% on the state income tax. In addition, the House is likely to vote on several veto overrides as we record the program. Betsy, any thoughts on this flurry as they head to a 4th of July break that we are now on the backside of without knowing exactly what all's occurred?
Well, we can talk about what did occur. You know, they've got constitutional amendments that they want to bring up. One of them is the fact that they want to put on it that only U.S. citizens can vote, and yet on the voter registration form at the very top it has said, are you a U.S. citizen? Check yes or no, and if you check no, you don't get a registration card to vote, and it's just to put it on the ballot to get people to, I think to draw out Republicans. They're scared that if they don't pass it on in the Constitution that the immigrants will be taken over. But
well, and many cities are allowing non-citizens to vote.
yes, but not in where? In North Carolina.
Not in North Carolina,
in
but
North
it would not be a
Carolina.
stretch to think
Right.
Charlotte or Durham or
Well,
some other could do it.
And the other thing is, the wrong judge could say that's permissive, it's not obligatory, and that's why they're trying to do it.
Right, right.
Okay, and so and require voter ID for all forms of voting, mail-in voting. Are you going to have to make a copy of your voter registration, of your voter ID, and send that in along with your ballot? And for those people that are usually use mail-in ballot, many of them infirm and handicapped, and it'll be onerous. That's one more thing to have to do in order to have mail-in ballots, but they won't put that on in the Constitution. Also, that about limiting the sales tax to 5%. Income tax to 5%. If you put, I'm worried about, you know, I don't want us to get like Kansas did. You know, they made all these changes and limited their tax base, and then they got in trouble. And I do not ever want North Carolina to be in that. And I'm afraid that if we enshrine it in the Constitution, and you know, it would take another vote by the people to undo it. So I'm not too happy with what the Republicans are doing for some unknown reason.
Well, Andy, just how much of your income do I have a right to?
Well, I don't think you should have a right to any of mine, but that's beside the
Okay,
point.
good for you.
Because we like roads, and we like to have law
Education.
enforcement and education and
Hospitals.
fire service and paramedics and all this stuff. It's stuff that we as a group have come together and said, we're going to form a government because there's some things that we want and need that we can't afford on our own. Can you imagine if you had to pave that road right in front of your house a little bit? What if we start breaking that up? I mean,
We did it for over 100 years without an income tax.
Well, but the thing of it was, we still were in the mud, most of this state, and you know that. And
But the income tax is not supposed to generally pay for roads. They've got some general fund money going now because they won't raise the gas tax.
Well, that's because how do you get a gas tax on an electric vehicle? I mean, that's the other thing we got to deal with.
It'll have to be a road use by miles, and they're going to have to do it, and they hadn't done it.
Well, and that's going to be an awful thing, because can you imagine they're going to have to put something that can track your car and how many miles you've gone. They're going to have to keep up with that and assess your tax. I think that's going to be aggravating. But what I guess the one that confuses me the most, though, Wes, is saying that only citizens can vote. Well, that's the way it's been. I mean, that is the legal standard, that you have to be a citizen. I mean, that's the lowest standard I think you could find.
But that's not the case in New York and other cities that have allowed non-citizens to vote in local and state elections. They can't vote in federal elections because that's codified.
All they're doing is clarifying what's already there from your point of view, Andy, so that some crazy judge or board of elections can't.
Well, it sounds to me like they've got another set of problems in New York, and I don't understand anybody that would allow a non-citizen to vote. I mean, that just to me is just insane. I mean, you've got to go through and be a citizen.
So we can count on your vote on this constitutional amendment, it sounds like.
I mean, but I don't know that we really need it. I mean, but I'm not.
It won't
I'm not
hurt
going.
you.
I'm not. I don't think it's going to do harm. But I think it's kind of. To me, it's just some way to gin up try to drive out about some voters and to go out and vote.
I
mean,
would agree if it wasn't happening in other places. Mike, you
Well,
got any thoughts on these other things?
Yeah, let me say, first of all, they overrode three
Vetoes.
Cooper vetoes in the House, and the Senate is doing it the day we tape this early, and those will almost certainly be overridden. One of those was a transportation bill which allows, among other, and it was requested by Cooper's own people, but he vetoed it because they added to it a provision that would allow trees to be cut 300 feet around billboards instead of 200 feet, which is the current law. It would have protected the state tree, the dogwood tree, but not the redbud trees. And Cooper was worried about the trees, so he vetoed it.
I think that's sweet.
4 Democrats voted with all the Republicans present, and it was overridden 74 to 42. 4 people were absent. But the other 2 vetoes they overrode 70 to 46. The one on wearing masks in public protest. Not a Democrat voted for that. And the reason that worked is with 4 absent, 70 was on the number 3/5. 3/5 of the 116 is 69.6. Now, to the constitutional amendments y'all were doing, that won't work. You have to have in the Constitution, it's 3/5 of those present and voting on a veto. But in the North Carolina Constitution, if you're putting a constitutional amendment, it takes 3/5 of the members of the House and 3 members of the 3/5 of the members of the Senate. It's not present and voting on constitutional amendment. We know we have at least one Republican in the House that is ill and may or may not be able to get there. So I have a question mark whether they're going to get it done. And I also think they're going to try. They're going to try, but it's going to probably have to be at one of these times that we talked about last week. They're going to come back after the June 30th leaving.
And that's all open-ended. They can take as long as they want to override, so there's no big thing there. One bill that I noticed that's being considered again today on June 27th, even though you're watching this 2 weeks later, would require disclosure on any political advertising that utilizes artificial intelligence. I think that's a unique way. We talked about that a couple weeks ago on the show. It's not regulating it, it's just making sure that when you watch the commercial, you're told this was AI generated. We'll see what comes of that. I'm sure there'll be more news by the time we sit down with you again in another week. Well, June is always an interesting month for those who watch the Supreme Court, as many rulings are handed down this month. Of those handed down thus far, Mike, give us 1 or 2 that you've found interesting and would have far-reaching consequences.
Well, I'm going to tell you one. I think 3 Republican appointees and the 3 Democratic appointees got wrong because they they upheld the Biden administration 6-3. It was on the one, I don't know the name of it, but it's where the Biden administration during COVID pressured big tech companies to take down information on the internet that threatened its narratives, which turned out often to be false, about COVID. And the justices ruled 6-3 that Missouri nor the citizens that brought the case, because they had things, like you could have a Carolina Journal article that I could paste on my Facebook page. If they didn't like it, they took it down because the administration was pressuring them to. And in his dissent, Judge Alito, who I think probably is the brightest mind on the court, he said, this case involves what the district court, which had found for the people that brought the case, a far-reaching and widespread censorship campaign conducted by high-ranking federal officials against Americans who express certain disfavored views. This is one of the most important free speech cases to reach the Supreme Court in years. Freedom of speech serves many valuable purposes, but its most important role is the protection of speech that is essential to democratic self-government. A coterie of officials at the highest levels of the federal government harried and implicitly threatened Facebook with potentially crippling consequences if it did not comply with their wishes about the suppression of certain COVID-19 related speech. Not surprisingly, Facebook repeatedly yielded. We are obligated, Alito says, to tackle free speech the issue that this case presents. This court, however, shirks that duty and thus permits the successful campaign of coercion in this case to stand as an attractive model for future government officials who want to control what our people say, hear, and think. I think Alito's right. I don't think that the government should be able to force me to take something down because it's just a different opinion than the government has.
Well, you can't argue with science, Mike.
Well, Mike, it goes back to the old saying, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. And that's really what this was driving at. Yeah, is it one of those things that's sitting on the precipice? Yes. We've got to be careful. We don't restrict, free speech. I mean, and it's tough, but by the same token, you just can't go out and blatantly keep putting out something that is factually may not be correct. And I think that's
what Fauci did for a year.
Well,
we've proven that that's what Fauci did.
But what I'm saying is this, it's a tough one to call, but still, I think when it boils down to, we have to be cognizant of what are we putting out that is factual. And I don't care who you are, it has to be correct information. If you've got people's attention, you owe it to the public to be honest and forthright and truthful.
And it goes along with what we talked about before about misinformation. And we all can go down and we have our own opinions, and we can go on the internet and we can go down rabbit holes and then find anything that agrees with what we may be thinking, but they may not necessarily be the facts.
If y'all remember, a lot of these people were scientists and physicians who were being quoted, who were pointing out that what Fauci and other government officials were promoting was not accurate. And these were not just naysayers trying to create a problem. They honestly believed that the government was self-giving false information, which in some cases has now been shown. We know that all of those types of masks that people were wearing were not effective now.
Well,
And if they can force it on Facebook, they can also force it on C19.tv. They can force it on me on the court square carrying a sign. We're going to take a quick break and come back and see what these two Democrats think the Supreme Court did right or wrong.
Between your job, your family, and other demands on your time, life can get pretty hectic. So we want you to take time for yourself. Hi, I'm Jennifer Harrell, and I want you to join me for your health. Each month, the Cleveland County Health Department and C19 TV will explore topics that affect you and your family's health. We'll discuss the importance of exercise, a healthy diet, and regular health screenings and checkups. From fitness tips to warning signs to the latest healthcare news. For Your Health will help keep you in shape and up to date in Cleveland County. We want you to be your best, so join us each month for Your Health, right here on Spectrum Cable and online, c19.tv.
Welcome back. We were discussing the Supreme Court. June is always a lot of rulings from the Supreme Court. Betsy, one that I found very interesting that came out a while back was the bump stock ruling, which really was not a Second Amendment issue. It was Congress had defined what an automatic rifle was. Bump stock doesn't make it automatic. Therefore, the Supreme Court very clearly said, if Congress wants to change this, that's fine, that's their prerogative. But the way the law is written, a bump stock cannot be banned as an automatic accessory. What did you see the Supreme Court do in June that you thought was good, bad, or indifferent?
And remember, we are taping here early before they recess, so they have time to do some things that with all these 9 things that's left. One of the things that the Supreme Court overturns the mayor's bribery conviction. $13,000 the mayor up in Indiana received from a company that had gotten a special contract. And so they had said that, you know, that they convicted him in the lower courts and on up of bribery, but the Supreme Court said that since it came after the contract was awarded, that but by terminology it was a gift and therefore it was not the bribery, so they overturned it. So I guess that's telling the people, you know, if you want to take gifts and kickbacks, you just need to wait until after the contract is awarded in order for it to be legal. And I don't think that's right. So I did not think that was a very good one. I am looking forward to what happens with the emergency abortion care bill that's before them and from Idaho. Are they going to allow emergency abortion in hospitals despite the state's restriction on the procedure?
Well, Betsy, while that one hadn't been decided formally yet,
Right.
somebody let a paragraph slip out that indicates
Right.
they're going to allow it.
And it stayed up for what, 2 hours, and then it came down. And it may be like the Roe versus Wade leak 2 years ago that turned out to be what they decided. So and of course seeing what they're going to do about Trump. Is he immune from all any type of crimes when he's president? So we'll see.
All right, Andy.
Well, I mean, that one thing that is, you've already sort of took my thunder on. I was going to talk a bit about that abortion thing getting out. I mean, it used to be, you never saw that. I mean, that was something, don't matter who it was, all that stuff got held in.
Well, Dobbs was the first one.
Yeah, it was. And it seems like somebody's just because when it gets around to abortion, some reason they're wanting to let this stuff out for some reason that I don't understand. And I think that demeans the institution of the Supreme Court because, let's face it, like I've said before, you've got to have somebody that's the umpire that can call strikes and balls in this thing. And that's what they've done. And I think for the most part, I think people have felt very comfortable over the years with the Supreme Court, no matter who was in charge, managed to keep that going in the, I thought it was an excellent tradition. I'm beginning to worry about that. And I'm seeing more and more, you've got more of these folks that are taking these junket trips and stuff like that, that really, and I imagine if the truth being known, Wes, they're all probably got some money they can pay for their own vacations, I'm sure. But it's just stuff that just casts doubt in people's minds, and that's what worries me about where we're at in the Supreme Court.
The institution traditionally has been beyond reproach, and it's my understanding that these leaks have created some definite problems among the members.
They've lost trust
Yes.
of each other. And that's what this place has always worked off of.
Yeah, and I think that's a loss for the country. Well, in North Carolina, municipal governments are granted authority from the state. With that comes the opportunities for municipalities to control 1 mile of territory outside of their jurisdiction, and in some cases 2 miles, even though those landowners have no representation. I'll grant that without county zoning, there may be some argument for extraterritorial jurisdiction, though I don't agree with it. But in Cleveland County, we now have countywide zoning. Mike, you've spent more time in city politics than just about anybody I know. Is ETJ a positive thing? And is it fair to the residents who live in this mile buffer who have no say-so in who's making decisions for what they can do with their land?
Well, let me say they have one form of representation, because if a city has an extraterritorial jurisdiction, whether it's 1 mile or in the case of Kings Mountain with local bill, at least since '99, 2 miles here. And certain larger cities can go 2 miles. I forget the population it has to be, but it's a certain
50,000
population.
or something.
50, yeah. But they have to appoint people that live in the ETJ to their planning and zoning and their boards of adjustment. So they have a vote there, but when it comes to city council who makes the final decision, you're on planning and zoning, you're absolutely correct. They don't have representation. So I have a nuanced position on this, having been a city guy. Actually, the city of Shelby qualified with permission of county commissioners to have a 2 mile ETJ. And before the county had a zoning ordinance in the late 90s, we asked for that from the county. And because Shelby was over 10,000, the county could and did give us that right. Then in 2000, the county, while I was still mayor, adopted a countywide zoning ordinance. And the city of Shelby, which got no tax base, had to do all the inspections, have all the public hearings over zoning and everything, had all this expense and very little income. We said, now that there's countywide zoning, we're not going to do it. Now, Kings Mountain got theirs through a local bill, and they exercised it in Cleveland. They could have in Gaston, but the Gaston County Commissioners said no. So this is what I think is the compromise position, because as Andy knows from his time in the legislature and you from your shorter time, ETJ is controversial. And I think that if there's no countywide zoning, like still in Rutherford County, that the 1 mile ETJ is probably the lesser of evils, because cities do need to be able to control the growth that may be in the city. But once a county adopts a countywide zoning ordinance, I personally think extraterritorial jurisdiction should go away, because then the city can lobby the county and try to keep the growth in a way that both would see as good. But the people who actually make the decisions then, instead of being the city, is the county, and the people that are being affected they can vote for the county commissioners. So I think it should go away when there's a countywide zoning ordinance.
And Andy, we've got countywide zoning in Cleveland County. What are your thoughts on the ETJs and how that is best handled to be fair to property owners?
Well, I think Comrade Phil Beck, as I've always called him, he's always loved, to an extent, ETJ. He loved annexation more than anything.
Oh, tell me about
Well,
that.
actually, ETJ was in part allowable because from 1957 till the Republicans took over in 2011, Andy, you could pretty much annex if you met certain statutory requirements. And the idea was you control the growth, so when you annex it, you can
Well, but that was
control the
one
growth.
thing that changed while I was down there, was there was certain things that you had, I think it was there was like a laundry list of 3 or 5 things that you had to provide if you were going to take in some new.
At least an eighth of it had to be contiguous to the current city limits, and it had to have a certain population, all kind of stuff like that.
It was a lot of that. Then it's about services to the area, water, sewer, police, street lights, whatever.
That's right, all of that.
I mean, all that stuff. But, I agree with Mike. I mean, there's really not a need for an ETJ once you've got countywide zoning. I mean, it's just not. And I think we saw some of that when I was out. You were talking about the Battle of Moss Lake. Well, Debbie and I fought that battle a long time ago. And
It still rages.
Yes, it still pops up. Oh, what is old is new again, they say. But you've got basically taxation without representation, and that's the argument about that. So, we've got so many different things in this state, just like the Moss Lake Authority, that every once in a while you got to go back and rethink.
Yeah. Betsy, I think you're outside the ETJ.
I am.
I'm inside the city, so I don't have the issue either, but your thoughts on this, just as a voter?
The only people I know that favor ETJs are those that sit on city councils, like in Kings Mountain. I know the people that are within it don't like them. And of course, I can see why Kings Mountain would like to have the revenue from certain businesses that are outside their city limits. But I don't know anybody that thinks that it's done well. But if you put people in an ETJ, you have to provide elections for the people of Kings Mountain. You have to make sure that during elections that those people out there in that mile get to vote.
But they
in
don't.
Certain,
They
well,
can't.
they used to.
No, they never have. You got to be inside the municipality
Well,
itself to vote.
When my husband was the chair of the Board of Elections, there was something that came up with the part in Crocker Road, and so they were going to have to allow them to vote.
Now, if they voluntarily annex something, they couldn't, Betsy, but the general statutes do not allow you to vote in the ETJ in the city
And
election.
see, here's the
There
example.
have been bills that have been introduced to allow it.
Yeah.
But they've never
Okay.
passed.
Here's the example,
so-
Andy.
all right.
Democrats letting non-citizens vote.
Oh, listen at you, listen at
Oh,
you.
my goodness.
Here we have gone around and around and around, Wes. We got
Wes,
back to
Wes,
it.
Wes.
I couldn't help it. We're going to move on to the lightning round. Betsy, I'll let you get started on this one.
Well, I just want to say I'm very disappointed in the Supreme Court. We've talked about this earlier, but the thing that bothers me so much is it has taken months for them to come to a ruling concerning whether or not President Trump is exempt from committing crimes. And in Watergate, it only took like 16 days for them to hear it and to come to a decision. And we're sitting here, and hopefully they'll do something before they go home, and they may extend the time through into July. But I'm very disappointed in the Supreme Court, and it's become partisan.
Mike?
Well, I'm going to go back to the ETJ with a different twist. There are some things a lot of people in local government in Cleveland and other counties just don't seem to ever learn. There's a political fishbowl in North Carolina, and cities and school boards are at the bottom. The counties are above them, and the state legislature can take all of their rights away as far as their authorities or give them. We are downstream in local government, and if you're in local government and you're in a city, don't mess with your county commissioners, don't mess with your legislators. If you're on the school board, don't make your county commissioners mad. Look at Brunswick County and Southport in a local bill. They're taking all of their extraterritorial jurisdiction away by a local bill because of a spat in Brunswick County. And you may find others that's going to be done to one degree or another. And in New Hanover County, the school board is in a battle with the county commissioners, and they just raised their funding $9.5 million, and they don't still have a school board budget. Learn who you are if you're in local government, and don't make the people above you mad.
Good point. Andy?
Amen.
Amen.
But the thing of it is, we were talking earlier about different things that you see around government. The strangest thing that we've got is the Catawbas over here with their casino. I mean, that is actually a sovereign country unto itself. They can do whatever they want. If they want to sell marijuana there, they can sell it if they want to. I mean, people don't realize how much it's a battle that you could have over stuff when you're an independent nation. And that's basically what the Catawbas are, as well as the Cherokees.
Yep.
And that's what the Lumbees really want. But
I think that one's going to be a stretch.
Yes, it is.
I think that's going to be a stretch. Well, we hope you enjoyed the show today. Thank you for inviting us into your home, and we look forward to seeing you next week on a new edition of Political Smackdown.